Should we actually start the episode?
No, I don't want to. All right.
Welcome to Let's Be Perfectly Queer,
A queer podcast creating space to talk about all things queer.
My name is Archie.
And I'm Katie.
And we are your hosts.
Questions of how you identify, seeking answers to clarify. Whether you're queen
or somewhere in between, let's be perfectly queer.
And welcome back for another week.
Yes.
There has been a little bit of a delay in it. We do have other lives. Yeah.
It's sometimes it's really hard to, because we do research and then we talk and then we also edit and then I also do the video editing. So it does take a little bit of time. And if you have noticed there, the videos have been a little bit delayed. They're there. I just keep forgetting to press up.
And we work and we do other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this week, unless we've got any news, is there anything that you want to chat about this?
Not news in particular as in world news because, you know, it is what it is. But what have we been up to?
What have we been up to? Oh,
I was on school holidays.
You were? I think we already did that last episode.
Yeah, but I was still on school holidays.
Oh, that's true.
And then went back to school and frantically trying to organise things for the week one. So it's been week one of school, which is hectic. Yeah. Always hectic. And then I got a tattoo yesterday.
You did?
Yeah. And I was going to start very, very, very small, but then I saw the design and my impulsiveness took over and I was like, yeah, let's make it big.
I know, it did, didn't it? It fits really well within space. So Archie is covered in tattoos. And like his leg is specifically associated with Pokemon. I'm pretty sure, is it your...
Most of it's Pokemon. So most of it's Pokemon. So I have, before, my first one was Charmander in a Captain America outfit. Because I was like, yeah, that's awesome. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. And then I was thinking about it and I was talking to the tattoo artist and we're like, oh, who else could we combine? And we're like, oh yeah. And then I wanted to do Squirtle in a Iron Man suit. Because when back in the day with the Game Boy, these were my starter Pokemon. So the Pokemon that I used to start with when you got to choose which Pokemon you could play to start. If you are too young, you're not going to understand that at all. And then
who did you start with? Charmander.
Charmander or Squirtle. Mm-hmm. Depending, because obviously with the Game Boy, which version you got, was it red, yellow, silver, blue, would depend on which starter Pokemon you could choose from.
Yep.
And so with me, it was always those two. And then I really like Pikachu, but Pikachu was never a starter.
Unless you look at the Pokemon that you can start now with, yeah, I'm pretty sure you can start with Pikachu. But
so with Pikachu, because on the games, the ones that I had, you couldn't have Pikachu as a starter, but I really like Pikachu anyway. And so I was like, what could Pikachu be? And I was like, Pikachu has to be Thor. So that's what I got the other day. And it was supposed to be small and fit in like a little ankle gap. And then I saw the design and I got there and I was like, yeah, let's make this big.
It always happens like that when you go and get tattoos. It's like, it's to fit the space, and also like if you've got such a rad design that you want to showcase what it really looks like and the intricacies of it as well. Yeah. Sometimes it works better for a bigger tattoo, and if you're not constrained by worried about like how much tattoo cost you've got covering and the cost and all that kind of stuff.
And yeah, so with looking at it, I was like, if it goes smaller, you're going to miss all the really cool little bits to it. So
yeah. True. That's very true. Yeah. I know that feeling.
And we've also been getting house ready for Halloween. We're big on Halloween. We love Halloween.
Big on Halloween. Only for so this is our second year hosting Halloween, and it is our holiday, our holiday.
With our friends, like someone has a holiday, so we have Halloween, and someone else has Christmas, someone else has Easter, and those are the main ones.
We're in Australia. I mean, we don't really celebrate that many different holidays. I mean, I know over in like Canada and America and in like India and all that other kind of stuff, it's like you've got a lot of different holidays that you celebrate. But I mean, even though we're incredibly multicultural here in Australia and people who come from different cultures will celebrate different things, if you're like a bit basic.
We're basic?
We are a bit basic.
Back in Carnarvon, we used to celebrate like the Moon Festival and that kind of stuff as well because they had a high Vietnamese community up there. Yeah.
It's a shame that you don't do that now.
No. And Chinese New Year and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I still go into the city and wander around during Chinese New Year and stuff, but not as big as it used to be.
Exactly. It's very true, isn't it? I think it also depends on who you surround yourself with and like...
That's true.
We do have a lot of multicultural friends.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Anything else been happening?
I don't think so. I think
that's pretty much it.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things that have been happening in Australia at the moment that I guess are quite disheartening.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could talk forever about it, but I don't think this is the space. So
we'll move on.
It is what it is.
We'll digress and we'll move on.
We'll digress. Absolutely. So today what we're going to be talking about. So we got this brilliant voice note and email from Jaymze.
Hi, friends. It's Jaymze from Canada. You might know me. I have a few songs on the Q32 charts. So I really love your podcast. It's like hanging out with friends, and you're informative, you're fun, but also you're spreading hope around the world. And you're reaching all four corners of the globe. And like I said, the earth is flat. It's not. But you're reaching all four corners of the globe, bringing hope to people, as well as smiles and, like I said, hanging out with friends. And that's important, especially right now. So that brings me to this, which was I suggested that you do a podcast on the September 1 Million March for Children here in Canada, which was countrywide. Thousands and thousands of people protesting against the sexual education that we have as part of our curriculum, saying that we are grooming children. The teachers are grooming children, and that, trans and queer and LGBTQ matters shouldn't be brought into school because grooming. But we're here and we exist, and but it is what it is. And unfortunately, Canada's taken a big step back and people are protesting, and it's bigger than just the curriculum. It's actually scary because it's creating a lot of hate and misinformation within the community. What happens to part of the community affects it as a whole, and unfortunately, all this negative attention towards drag and trans and the whole LGBTQ community recently, within the last year and couple of years, it's scary because things are going a bit backwards. Mentality, unfortunately, I have friends that I've lost because of it, and I just thought it would be a great topic. It's current, it's now, and it's never been more important for us to fight for our rights to live as human beings, just like everybody else. So thank you for all that you do, my friends, because you do a lot. And I look forward to your podcasts all the time. So keep them up. Keep doing good work. And kisses from Canada. Mwah.
James from Canada sent us this beautiful voice note and an email to talk about the riots or the protests that have specifically been happening in Canada, secondary to sex education and trans rights, and just basically like rights within the LGBTQ community for kids. And it was quite a big in the way that it's quite emotional and emotive kind of topic, because it leads to so many different things. And we have talked previously about sex education and how that affects growing up and how that affects your general societal outlook on certain issues. And we are very lucky here in Australia that we do have the certain education that we do have presently at this very point in time. Whenever you're a nurse and you're like, at time of report, that's what I'm basically
saying. At time of recording.
Yeah, exactly. But it was really sad to hear about these kind of protests that were happening and what it will mean for Canada. And then looking into it, it's quite similar that there has been these kind of protests in England as well. I saw these protests in London as well. But to say specifically what we're going to look at as the Canadian ones and kind of like talk about that a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And I think our next recording, I might actually bring it to the news segment, and we'll see what other kind of things happening are in the world at the moment. Because even though when we do talk about news a lot of the time, it's kind of like
little bits and
bobs.
It's like it's the spark notes of the news.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a lot of people out there who do talk about this kind of stuff that make it their whole channel that they talk about it. Yeah, so like
the Randy Report.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm saying yes because I don't know people's names, but I do know their faces.
So it's like an LGBTQ podcast and they've got a blog and stuff, and they talk about news that are just all about LGBT and how it affects the LGBTQ community. So if you want to know specific news, you can head over there.
Yeah, very true. There's a lot of really good resources. So it's such an interesting topic to talk about. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the segment up into telling you about what's happened, which isn't going to be the longest part, but then we're going to have a discussion about certain things that I want to get your opinion on, because I have very strong opinions, which
yes, you do.
Like I always
You're Hungarian.
Do. I'm Hungarian. Like, what do they expect? I'm Hungarian, Irish, Scottish, and like other things. So like, what do you really
very
expect
strong-willed.
from me? Very strong-willed.
Or stubborn. A little bit of both.
One would say.
Yep.
I'm going to say. So I'm going to tell you a bit about it, and then we're going to have a discussion so we can go through it. On this episode, we're going to be delving into the recent protests and counter-protesters rocked Canada and sparked debates over gender identity and sex ed policies in schools. So this all started in September, and it started with the 1 Million March for Children movement, which aimed to protect our children from indoctrination and sexualization. But It quickly morphed into a nationwide discussion about how schools addressed issues on gender identity and the rights of their LGBTQIA plus students.
Mm-hmm.
So thousands took to the streets across the country. From Toronto's Queen's Park, it became a focal point where they had both sides of the debate. In Vancouver, there was over 1,000 people turned out and expressed their opinions on their LGBTQ plus rights in schools. Even in Ottawa, thousands of people gathered in front of Parliament Hill with counter-protests led by the New Democratic Party leader, Jaymze. So there was all these protests that were happening across Canada, basically at the same time, which was in September.
Why have we not heard about this?
It's a really good question, and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was quite astounding when Jaymze came to this with us.
Yeah, because I never heard anything before Jaymze came to us, and I was like, what is Jaymze talking about?
I wasn't really sure, because I was just like, oh, this is really interesting. And when I started looking into it, it's very big. Granted, when I say very big, it looks like the population of each protest was, from the articles that I looked at CBC, they said approximately 1,000 people at each protest.
Yep.
But there did have to have quite a lot of police presence at these protests as well. And there was even one occasion surrounding this issue, not specifically to protest, I believe, where someone tried to hold a knife to two people. And this guy, specifically made sure that they were in that kind of club or they were associated with that kind of person. And then they came and pulled a knife on them. So it's something that's definitely, I think that it's been triggered about what's happening with America. What do you think?
But what's been happening in the world for LGBT discrimination to rise so fast?
I don't know. There's a lot of factors to it.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
It's misinformation. People don't like change, and they're scared for people to actually have rights like everybody else, and it doesn't make any sense. It's frustrating.
It is, isn't it?
People don't like change. But to get to this point, there would have been change because, if you look back in all the historical documents, LGBT people had the same rights as everybody else. So I don't get it.
It's so true. And I saw this great quote the other day, and I think I said it on the last episode as well, is that with someone else having rights, you're not taking rights away from yourself to give it to somebody else. It's not like you've got a pie and to allow somebody else to have a right, you have to take a piece of the pie and then give it to them. Therefore, you've got less pie. Fucking love pie. But that is not how it works.
No.
That's literally not how it works. It doesn't take something away from your rights by giving somebody else rights. It doesn't.
No, not at all.
It absolutely baffles me.
It's like people are scared to lose something. It's like you're not going to lose anything. You're just giving someone else the same opportunity that you already have.
Yeah.
That's it.
But this topic specifically, you're actually depriving children of knowledge. You're depriving them of education. And that's actually going to impair them in their life. By holding people back in this kind of way or holding children back in this kind of way, it leaves for a worse future, first of all, because they have added discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
And then second of all, they're not going to understand or be able to interact with people appropriately because you're saying that there are people out there that should be segregated.
Yeah. Makes no sense.
It makes absolutely zero sense. It's so weird. Now breaking into the core issues that are at play here, because we've got a couple of different sides, which are just
you always have different sides.
Absolutely. So at the heart of these protests are policies emerging in New Brunswick and in Saskatchewan that require young people to get parental consent before teachers can use their preferred names and pronouns. And then critiques argue that this is a violation of children's rights and could potentially lead to outing transgender youth to their parents against their will.
Yeah, and it'll lead to increase. And so I'm just going to mention something. So just a quick trigger warning, I am going to mention suicide amongst young and the mental health. So if you need to stop listening for a little bit, come back in a second. So basically, this will lead to increased rates of suicide amongst LGBT people, which is already disproportionate to the rest of the general young adolescents and young kids population. You know what I mean? So this will lead to an increase in suicide rates because if they need to get permission from parents who are homophobic, who are transphobic, who already have a terrible life at home, sometimes school is the only place that they have that little safe bubble where they can be who they want to be. And if you're asking parental permission, like what if they have, if it goes against their religious beliefs and that kind of thing, we don't know what's happening behind closed doors. Like it'd be great to know what's happening behind everybody's closed doors and help and support them. But by getting parental permission, you're putting this child into danger.
Yeah. And sometimes school is that oasis that you can actually get away from places. It can get away from either a dangerous environment because there's a lot of domestic violence out there. We've talked previously about how kids who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community are exponentially higher rates of domestic violence or parental violence. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a safe space being there.
No.
And then outing them, like it says, outing them to their parents. I know my friends knew a lot more, like much sooner than my parents knew that I was bisexual at the time.
Yeah.
It tends to be the people that you confide in first.
It's a safe place to explore. And if you take away that opportunity for kids to explore, you're going to see, increased rates of depression and kids being withdrawn, and it's going to impact on their education and their well-being. So it's ridiculous. I just don't get it. Like at schools, kids now don't need to get permission to be asked to be referred to as a certain name by teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Do you know, a lot of my teachers had no idea what my first name was. Because when you do the roll call, like when it was, because the school that we went to, it wasn't very big class sizes and all that kind of stuff. They'd be like, oh, yeah. And because I got called by my last name through my whole of high school.
Yep.
Like that's from year 8 onwards. I was always just my last name. And because, my first name is actually Catherine and I will never go by that. Dudes. Who else feels like their name doesn't actually suit their personality?
I'm sure there's a few people.
Oh, especially listening to our podcast.
Yeah. But
yeah, it's one of those things that, like, if they had actually adhered to every single person and what they specifically, what about nicknames? Like, it comes under that whole stupidity of being like, do you have to ask consent to be called
a nickname?
No. To be called Archie instead of Archer?
No.
What the flip?
Yeah.
I really don't understand that. So it's worth noting that many parents and socially conservative groups are using this protection and protesting under the banner of parental rights. I'm using that in quotation marks for anyone who's not seeing on Instagram. However, some critics point out that this term might not accurately represent the concerns of the LGBTQIA plus or the parents that are LGBTQIA+.
No, it's more about the other parents.
It's denying that people exist.
Yeah.
Is that not what it is?
Yeah.
Like if you're a parent who's queer and you're bringing your child to school and then basically the curriculum or like what other people are vying for is that don't talk about this.
Yeah, so what's going to happen next? Are they going to say, oh, I don't want my child to be partnered up with that child because their parents are LGBT? Like,
it's segregation.
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong with people?
Yeah.
The debate also highlighted the importance of inclusive education policies. In places like Ontario, local schools, local school boards issued statements expressing their support for LGBTQ students, staff and families. They emphasised the need for safe and inclusive environment for all students, regardless of their gender identity or sexual orientation. So that was the school board coming out with that.
No, that's amazing. So I know in schools in Perth that they go one step further.
Yeah.
So they have an inclusive education policy that incorporates race, religion, beliefs, disabilities, sex, gender, and sexuality.
Yeah.
And you do not get discriminated on any of that.
Which you shouldn't be discriminated on.
No.
And it shouldn't be something that comes into a factor with this kind of stuff. You need the education on it, but it's not something that you should be like, oh, nah, you can't be teaching here because you're gay.
Right. So in the last episode where in one of the news articles, I think we spoke about the fact that there's a MP over East trying to make it that you cannot be fired or dismissed due to your sexuality, and that should not play a role at all when you're trying to get a job in the school education setting. Even in private and Catholic and religious schools as well. Because if you're the right person for the job, that's all that should matter.
And really, we are so short on teachers, and I'm not sure if it's similarly like that around the world.
Yeah.
But we are so short of teachers here in Australia, and you need to have a good teacher for good education to happen.
That's pretty much it.
And without our students actually learning, and these days you see it a lot, and I know we've discussed this many a times, is that kids aren't reaching the milestones that they should be when it comes to just basic like spelling, grammar, just easy things on the curriculum that they should have been learning back in primary school. But instead of it being like we don't hold kids back in school these days,
No.
we just keep on pushing them forward, even though they haven't. It's actually a disservice to them because if they haven't reached a milestone.
So if they haven't grasped the basic concepts that you are meant to grasp at a year 3, 4, 5 level, you are actually disadvantaging them by moving them forward because they're always going to be behind.
Yeah.
So if you, this is what my beliefs anyway, not everybody's going to believe that, but if you were to keep a child back for 1 year, you're going to let them be able to understand and grasp those simple concepts that they weren't able to grasp the year before. But if you don't, they then have those concepts that they don't grasp. They go into the next year and then they don't get the next one because you needed the stuff from the previous year to be able to keep growing and improving.
Yeah.
So I just don't know why we don't keep kids back.
It's the foundations.
Yeah.
See, primary school is your foundations of learning. And if you don't have your foundations of learning, you can't actually do anything.
No.
You can't.
It's like asking someone to run before they can walk.
Yeah, totally.
Asking someone to rap before they can talk. Yo. Yeah.
Oh, bless. God love you.
Yeah. You go.
But it's similarly in the way that, like, if you can't read, I remember when we were younger, we used to have that 1-800 reading service.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And it never occurred to me. Do you know what? The ad's playing in my head at the moment.
Because my granddad tried it.
6550506.
Yeah, so I think my granddad was looking into it. So yeah.
And I think that's really important, having the accessibility. And granted, we don't really watch free-to-air TV, so I'm not really sure if that ad is still out there. But it was a reading and writing service that allowed people to learn.
1300650506.
I wonder if that's still their number. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying before.
Oh.
Yeah.
I totally just disengaged with you completely because I was thinking about other things. My bad.
No. Yeah. I can see your brain going off on like...
Yeah, that's
Very
exactly
true.
what happened.
Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, back onto the actual topic.
Exactly.
We do this so much.
We do, don't we? So the situation was complicated by the fact that different provinces had varying approaches to sexual orientation and gender identity in the curricula.
Just like in Australia, every state and territory has a different curriculum.
Yeah, it's very true. So, for instance, British Columbia doesn't have a specific sexual orientation and gender identity curriculum, but they emphasise human rights, diversity and anti-discrimination education, which is good. But I think in these kind of circumstances, like we've talked to before in our sex education episode, is that you need these things specifically in a curriculum so they get discussed.
Yeah, because if you don't put them in, they don't discuss, or they get discussed on the playground where the kids don't get the true information.
Yeah, they need the appropriate information. And it needs to be something that we talk about in each facet because, like, if we're talking about let's not discriminate against anybody, which is definitely something that we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't have a bias due to race, religion, sex education, sexual identity, gender identity, anything like that. We shouldn't be discriminating for any of those reasons. But you have to literally educate people on each of those reasons for people to understand them.
Yes.
Because if you don't talk about them, again, it's the issue of, like, if you don't talk about it, you don't know about it.
Yeah.
So in response to this process, we've seen several political leaders take a stand. Which is great. So specifically, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau.
Oh, I love Justin Trudeau.
I know.
Well, I don't know. I love him. I just love the videos about him. I don't know. I don't actually know too much about him.
I'm going to withhold my ideas because I feel like as a generalizing statement, I like what he has to stand for. Yeah. But also, I've not done a deep dive on him. So
I don't know anything about his policies or what he's doing for the country. I just like, he's gay, isn't he?
No, he's got a wife.
Oh, I'm thinking about the wrong person. Ignore me.
I wish he was gay.
Because there's a gay prime minister somewhere. I thought it was him. Ignore me. I don't know much about him.
So, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expressed his firm condemnation of hate discrimination targeted at the LGBTQ community. He emphasised the government's commitment to supporting the LGBTQIA individuals, which I think is brilliant. Yeah. I think in the same way that we had Joe Biden do it for America and be like, I support trans rights. This is exactly what Justin Trudeau is doing. Yes. I really enjoy that. Yes. I think it's such an important thing for political leaders, especially those to stand up and be like, I support the queer community. I support LGBTQIA people, individuals, children for growing up in a safe environment. I think that's bloody brilliant. And it's what we have always needed, really. So Canadians from coast to coast are engaging in these kind of conversations. However, it's important to remember that it isn't just about policies. It's about the well-being and acceptance of LGBTQIA plus youth in our communities. As we navigate these discussions, let's just remember the words of activist Celeste Trianon. Trans people, they exist in society and they deserve inclusion just like everyone else.
Yeah, agreed.
So I got some really cool quotes from all these discussions. So I know that we've talked a lot about just the education in general. That was a long pause, wasn't it? About the education in general. And really there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of topics that interacted and are involved in this because it's not just the education that's being delivered. It's also the discrimination that is happening as well.
Yeah.
So from the Toronto District School Board, we do not tell children who they should be, but we welcome them as they are.
Yeah.
Which I thought was such a good whole inclusively understanding that, and I think that's a really good statement to come out from a school board, just as a blanket statement being like, we support our children. We support them being who they need to be. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And they're emphasising their support for every student's rights to express their gender identity and sexual orientation.
Yeah, I love that.
So Mayor Sutcliffe, so the Ottawa Mayor, Mark Sutcliffe, expressed concerns that the protests may negatively impact their LGBTQ youth who are seeking acceptance and support. He emphasises the importance of providing a safe and inclusive environment for all school people or all young people.
Yeah.
So he was saying that protests may cause harm to youth which are looking for support and acceptance. And I think that's what it comes down to as well. Like when you have these kind of discussions or these kind of protests about things that are so personal.
It's also things that don't actually impact you at all. Like it really does not impact you whether a child is LGBTQIA plus or not. So it really makes no sense. And in a world where you're already trying to navigate because you've got hormones and you're trying to navigate the school society and learning new things and education and you're seeing the rest of society actually protesting against you, that's a lot for a young person to take.
It is, isn't it? And it's going to leave you feeling like you don't belong even more in a world that you're struggling with acceptance so much anyway, that having such an outward, such a big gesture from the community or from people at your school being like, we don't accept you.
Yeah, and and kids already have such a tough time belonging. And then you're also adding this element because one of the things, the kids just want to belong, and it's one of the things that they struggle with at schools, trying to find the group that makes them feel whole, you know? And then you're adding all these other elements, you're just going to alienate them and make them feel even more alone.
Yeah, you are, aren't you?
Or less than, you know?
Yeah. Like you're not a full citizen. Yeah. Like you're not a full person.
Right, because like even if I know we spoke about before, but talking about when there was the same-sex marriage debate.
Yeah.
And how little that made me feel. But we were adults at the time. Imagine being a kid and having everybody protest your rights.
And people wonder why so many people suffer from internalized homophobia.
Yeah.
When we've got these kind of things happening, it's absolutely baffling how you couldn't suffer from internalized homophobia when there's so many negative connotations with just being queer. When there's so many negative connotations, actually, I'm going to branch that out to being like anyone who's part of the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yes.
Anybody who isn't seen as being part of what society did previously deem as normal when there is no such thing as normality.
No.
It's absolutely baffling. If you're happy, I'm going to run through a couple of questions with you, if that's okay.
Sure.
Lovely. We'll see how they go. We might have already addressed them.
Probably.
So how do you feel about the term parental rights? And I'm just going to answer that first before you have a chat about it. Because my feelings about parental rights is that half of me will actually just want to mention the company again, like the people who are anti-protesters again, or the people who are protesting against the queer community, just because I don't want to actually bring
They're not important.
Yeah, they're not important. They're just stupid individuals.
The people who are,
But when they use this term parental rights, as in like they have governance over their children and what their education should be and that their ideologies about how their children should be brought up are more important than what the curriculum is.
But the problem there is parents bring in their own prejudice. And they're already limiting what their child can learn and what their child can how their child can grow and that kind of thing. So if it's a parental right, you are already bringing your internalized homophobia or everything else that all that to your child. Let your child work out things on their own. Guide them, but let them be their own human.
And it's like you were mentioning there. It's also based on your own biases. Your biases and your idea of what parental rights are going to be totally different to what the next person's parental rights are. Say you've got some person who's grown up in a highly religious family that has a very strong family unit, to somebody who has maybe parents who either
separated, divorced.
You might have a single parent household. You might actually be growing up with like family members rather than parents, or like by your actual siblings. You might be...
Everybody's idea of parental rights are different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you have, and like I mentioned there, is like if you have a queer couple that are bringing their child to school, they've got a right over their child learning as well.
Yeah.
So why, and to be honest, as a parent, and this is probably going to be like a hot take, I don't know, but it's how I feel about it, is like, you're actually not the one who should be making the decision about their education.
No.
The government, and this is why it sounds, I see your eye twitch at that point.
Yeah.
But like, as a governing body, the government has a whole ministry that, based on education and data and evidence-based research on what children should be learning and what's actually going to be best for our society and have the least amount of discrimination for everybody. And that's the government's job to do it. As a parent, as a singular parent, you don't have the time nor the resources to be looking at all of this.
You're not an expert in the field.
Not.
You just know what you know. And if you're looking at things, and we were saying like the government and stuff, and we spoke about it before, the Australian curriculum is very outdated and it does need to change.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like the curriculum constantly changes, yes. Like if you're a teacher, you know the curriculum constantly changes, but the system has been the same for over 100 years. Like the school system, it was the same when we went to school. It hasn't changed. It's just what's being taught has changed a bit. Yeah. And I feel like that if you're not an expert in the field, you don't know what your child needs to learn. You can educate them however you like at home, but why are you disadvantaging your child by only showing them one part of the world or one part of your world?
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I really do. Because you can only teach what you know.
Yeah.
And we're actually not professors
No.
in what we know.
No.
Yeah. It's absolutely baffling. And I think that's what also the pandemic taught a lot of parents out there is that...
How hard teachers actually work.
Yeah. How hard it is.
Yeah.
It's not just the topics that you're teaching about. It's also behavioural management. It's also management of a human being and making sure that their safety and their well-being is also optimized. And I don't mean that at home, but I mean that in the way of like...
You're no longer just a teacher. You're a teacher. You're, you have to listen to their problems. You're we're not psychologists, but basically the way people say it's like, you're a teacher, you're a parent, you're a psychologist, you're
therapist,
all that kind of stuff. So you're no longer just a teacher because you have to think about, okay, how am I going to teach them in the classroom? You need to think about their well-being and their mental health. And then you need to think about how to support them and how to make them, in other ways. You're no longer just a teacher. There's so many other aspects of teaching that you now take on.
A lot of responsibilities. I think back in the day,
you were a teacher. You stayed in front of the classroom and you taught. That's it.
That's absolutely it. Yeah. And it wasn't your responsibility to cater for the psychological needs or the physical needs of your students. You were just
when a student has an intellectual disability.
Yeah.
Back in the day, teachers didn't really focus on that as much as we do now. You know what I mean?
And you have to be accessible. As a teacher, you have to be accessible in the ways of you have to make sure that what you're teaching is both appropriate
and
as
engaging.
well as engaging, but then also caters for people who, like you just mentioned, had disabilities. So making sure that if you've got somebody who's hearing impaired or if you've got somebody who is intellectually impaired or might have some visual impairments, that those kind of educational resources can branch out.
But it's not only that. You also need to think about, yes, you need to help support those who need help, but also you need to push those who are on the other end, who are academically gifted. And it's about catering to everybody's needs within a classroom. And every class, you will have people who need a lot of support to get them through with the basic skills and the basic concepts. And then you have people who have nailed it, and you also have to keep everybody engaged and everybody supported at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes into parental rights, I think that, it's great to have ideologies and have things that you want your children to learn. But really, you're not the people to be making these decisions about it.
No. And if you want your kids to just have one outlook, send them to specific schools.
Yeah.
Don't send them to independent public schools or public schools in general. If you want them to have those kind of outlooks, then send them to those schools.
Oh, gosh.
You know?
I was like,
but you know, if I'm saying if that's what they want, then yeah.
So in your opinion,
yes,
what could be some potential solutions to bridge the gap between the various perspectives on this issue?
Education.
Yeah.
You know, education of education of parents, you know, but the thing is you can say, hey, we're going to have these information nights, but parents don't always turn up. So it's like you can give it's like that old saying, you can, what is it? You can lead a horse to water,
but you can't make it drink it.
Yeah, that's exactly that. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So you can do this, but at the end of the day, the parents will still make their own decisions.
Yeah. So education is probably, like you were saying, a huge one. I think it being normalized more, like we're getting to a society where, I mean, being queer is out there.
Yeah.
A lot more than it has been previously. But I still think we need more representation.
Oh, yeah.
And like we do have representation. There's a lot
more television shows and stuff that are coming. Like we just watched Everything Now as well, and that's got a show with a bit more representation.
Mm-hmm.
But it really doesn't help. And we're going to talk about this next episode with media disinformation about the queer community.
Yes, that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive.
Because I think if you're educating people from a grand scale, it needs to come from media, and I'm not just talking about TV shows and films and all that kind of stuff. I sound very old when I say films. No, movies and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It needs to come from the media. It needs to come from journals. It needs to come from news. It needs to come from that kind of facet, because the kind of people who make the better decisions and are generally more well-rounded, and this is a very generalized statement, are the younger demographic.
Yes, because we are not passive learners anymore, if that makes sense. So back in the day, so like the early days and with our parents, they were given information and that was the information.
Yeah, true.
There was no internet to search for your own resources and that kind of thing. You know, you had encyclopedias, but encyclopedias also very, you know.
And it was very much like, this is the fact. There's nothing else.
There was no other, you know, there wasn't like 5, 6 different sides of an argument. So now we have grown up in an information age where we have all of these resources. So we can say, okay, I see where that point of view, what other information and sources are there, and make your own mind up.
Yeah.
You know, but back in the day it was like, this is the information.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? There is a lot of resources.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can cause a lot of fatigue, and I guess that it can cause information fatigue. And I think it's one of those things that it is difficult doing research at times, but it is so much more important doing the research and having an understanding of the issues at hand, especially if you're going to have a say.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people who are out there who aren't educated, having these loud voices, and unfortunately the louder voices get heard more. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, we do hours of research trying to give you guys the best information that we can find. And, you know, it is exhausting, but it's good that we do have access to so much information.
Yeah, it's true. So in essence, that was a discussion about the protests in Canada. It seems to be something that is coming up more and more. And I think that with how it's been addressed by both the school boards as well as the Prime Minister have been really important.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see what happens next, because unfortunately these protests are more than likely to continue happening. And the fact that we've seen them in America and now we've seen them in Canada and we're seeing it in the UK as well.
So I'm not going to lie, I am scared about my position. Yeah. I'm scared if that was to happen here, what happens then?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I don't want to be in an education system that denies me and my community our rights. So I am scared, and I reckon it will happen if it, you know, we kind of follow the footsteps of everyone else, and I'm scared that it will happen here. We'll start seeing a lot more protests against inclusive education and against sex education and certain stuff here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it would look like, but I'd be naive to think that it wouldn't happen here as well. Obviously, with the segment that we're going to talk about as well in next episode, it could definitely happen here. And if it was to happen here, I would not be a teacher, because I'm not going to, you know what I mean? I'm not going to
it's true.
Lie and deny a part of myself to appease a small, loud community who are screaming about, you know, misinformation.
Exactly. Exactly. It's true, isn't it?
So it'd be something that we should keep an eye on. Like, I'm intrigued that I didn't even hear anything about it.
And I guess that's the other thing. If you guys have something that you want us to cover, or if you think that is really important that we haven't talked about previously, please just send us a message.
Yeah, like what James did. Send us lots of voice notes, and We will get to the rest of them. It's just sometimes we read them and we forget, or like we're left on red. We don't mean to. Busy lives and a little bit of ADHD.
Two people with ADHD running a podcast.
Yeah.
We've done really well so far, basically.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jaymze. Really, really appreciate you reaching out and sending us voice notes. And yeah.
It's been great. And if you've liked this episode or any of our previous episodes, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us.
Yes, that'd be great.
And leave us a comment on what you think of this and
yeah.
what you think things that we could do to actually improve it so we don't hit these problems again. Yeah. What's your take on it?
And are you scared that this same thing could happen in Australia?
Yeah.
What's
absolutely.
your thoughts? Until next time, I hope that we have been
perfectly queer.